Welcome back here on the Michigan Soccer Central podcast. Excited for this next segment. I invited an expert on to review the U.S. Open Cup 2023 final and the tournament that concluded just last week with MLS side Houston Dynamo raising the cup to become champion. And lo and behold, I reach out to the expert, and he's already working on the stages of qualifying for next year's edition already. So I wanted to bring him on before any further ado, the senior editor of the Cup.us, a core member of Michigan Soccer Central, and an expert on the U.S. Open Cup. Josh Hakala, thank you so much for rejoining us here on the Michigan Soccer Central podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, like I said in my preamble, I actually interrupted you. It is the second round of qualifying for the 2024 edition.
Yeah, the qualifying for the next tournament actually starts before the previous tournament is over, which is kind of a regular thing around here. So it's once things start to calm down a little bit before the final, the one game. How hard is it to cover one game? And then you have 23 games in the first round, and then you have 44 games in the second round. So it picks back up pretty quickly around here.
So yeah, the Cup.us. So what did I interrupt? What is the active tournament rounds or the qualifying rounds look like at your website?
So we just finished this. Well, actually, we have one more game left in the second round. There was a game that got, I don't know, moved or postponed. So I believe that is tomorrow. I guess what is that? I think it's Tuesday.
October 3rd.
October 3rd would be the last game of the round. So the other 43 games, well, I should say 42 games, and there was one forfeit. Were all completed over the weekend. So it was a busy weekend trying to keep up with all of that. As you might imagine, amateur soccer teams have a very let's say there's a wide gap between the quality level of, let's say, live streams that are available, if they exist at all. Sometimes it's even very difficult to get anyone to give you updates on these games. So it's pretty tricky, but we try to keep people posted as to what's happening.
So the Cup.us keeping everyone as informed of America's oldest tournament or the qualifying for it as can be. But I actually did bring you on to talk the 2023 edition that wrapped in the Houston Dynamo beating a Messi-less Inter Miami. The tournament obviously covers a lot.
You are required to mention Messi in any situation where he is involved, and I get it. But I think the extreme example was ESPN.com's headline for the U.S. Open Cup final was something to the effect of Messi doesn't play, Inter Miami loses Open Cup final. So sorry, Houston. I think that was very unfortunate, but congratulations to Houston. But yeah, there was no Messi, and I think that was a big disappointment for a lot of fans. But hey, it worked out for Houston.
I know in the early rounds, especially in the first round, that the top teams come into it gets a lot of attention, but it seems a little bit separated from those final, like the semifinal, and in the final round where it's just the MLS teams. Do you guys yourselves that are in the thick of it covering it all feel that disconnect, or because there's a lot more games, a lot more heavy lifting at the front end compared at the end? How do you view it as someone who's covered it for like 20 years?
Well, it is tough because they really, it's pretty consistent for a while there. It's like every couple of in every couple of weeks there's games, but then once you get to the quarterfinals, they were in. I mean, obviously we had Leagues Cup going on, so I mean it's always a different calendar, so it's tough to know what the schedule is going to look like every year. But yeah, there typically is a gap between the semifinals and the final, and sometimes the quarterfinals to the semifinals. There are people who have they've suggested trying to make them more close together to try to keep the momentum going. But I would probably lean more on the side of like maybe giving the semifinals and a final like time to breathe a little bit, and also to be able to promote it and sell tickets and try to like build a little have a little bit of hype leading up to it. I mean, obviously Leagues Cup made it June to late August. I mean, that's maybe an extreme gap, but yeah, that's pretty much what it was. And this one from August 23rd for the semifinals, and then September 27th for the final. So it was a pretty big gap, but I think they just do that just to put butts in the seats and try to get a little momentum going and hype it up a bit.
For some context to the listeners who uh, haven't ventured too much into the Open Cup, what stage of the competition, if there was a Cinderella amateur team that started winning some games, how many games would they play before they might run into Detroit City FC?
They would, well, so there's typically, I mean, if you go through the open division qualifying tournament, that basically anybody can enter as long as your league qualifies. You've played like a minimum of 10 games, and then I mean, and you're affiliated with US Soccer, you can get in. If you and I want to start a team and join a an affiliated league, then we could join. And typically you gotta win at least 3 games. I mean, there's 4 rounds typically. Of course, that changes depending on the number of teams that are going to get in, but usually there's 3 to 4 rounds, and then so you could have a max of 4 games before you get to the tournament proper, and then you get into the tournament, and usually the first round is either against most likely another amateur team, but sometimes you might get a third division team. So you might get a pro team right out of the gate, depending on how the draw works out. And so usually you wouldn't run into a second division team like Detroit City until round 2. So that's typically how it works out.
Yeah, looking back at where Detroit City FC did enter the fray was back in early April. I went to that when DCFC took out Gold Star FC. That was at the beginning of April. So, and that's still seems like a lifetime ago. So the
I
team
know
that
it does.
might be qualifying now on an amateur team could be worlds away if they were to make that uncharted run deep into this tournament.
Yeah, and typically they have the games be regional so that they minimize travel. So it's that's why you usually end up with a team in your neck of the woods, depending on how the map works out. That's why Detroit City played Michigan Stars in the last year. Then in 2022, they've played the Bucks a few times. So that, I mean, that's usually how it works out. And then usually in the set by the if you get past that opening game, then you're still working with teams in your region, but you're kind of at the mercy of who won the previous round, and how the draw works out. So that's why Detroit City had to play Minnesota United in their second game. That's just the way the draw worked out, and they're in their region. I mean, it could have been worse. I mean, it could have been like Livonia City going down to what was it, Lafayette, Louisiana, to play a qualifier. I mean, that's just an unfortunate way that some team's going to get the short end of the stick when it comes to travel. But usually these are regional matchups in this tournament.
I think that that's how I discovered Livonia City was via their story of making that trip down there. I think that's my discovery of Livonia.
Yeah.
Um, but to kind of reflect on the 2023 edition of the US Open Cup, you've been covering this tournament for 20 or so years, I believe. Where does this year's kind of rank, and what was kind of like a memory from it?
I would say, I mean, I think the big takeaway is going to be that Messi joined the tournament. I think it's such an easy thing to say, but really, I mean, frankly, like I know people might be a little I don't want to say overwhelmed by by the Messi hype, but I mean, like it's real. I mean, it's here, and I think it's good for the game. But um, this tournament in the semifinals and the finals, what was the most watched semifinal, the most watched final ever in the history of the tournament because of him. And he didn't even play in the final, but enough people, I mean, hundreds of countries, like over 100 countries bought the rights for this game or for this tournament because of him. So, I mean, while he only played one game, and that was a pretty great performance and one player of the round for his efforts. I mean, I would say that gave the tournament a boost, and we'll see if what'll happen in the next tournament, if maybe plays in more games. I don't know. Like I don't know what the status will be next year, but I think every tournament kind of has that thing. I mean, last year, I think the year before, I think Sacramento Republic, the second division team, making it to the final, that was kind of the big headliner. You have some amateur teams that kind of capture the imagination. I think that's really kind of at the core of what people really take away from the tournament are the underdog stories. So I think that's really what it comes down to. But in this case, I mean, I hate to say it, but this is I've heard this referred to as now, oh, that tournament that Messi plays in. And you know what? If that's the way that people discover the tournament that otherwise wouldn't have discovered it, I guess I'll take that. We'll take that W and hopefully build on it. And I've heard that with some Detroit City fans, some people who are maybe casual Detroit City fans, and when Detroit City was playing, Open Cup games against, they played against the Columbus Crew, and I think that got a lot of people's attention here locally in Michigan. And I got a lot of questions of like, oh, that tournament that Detroit City plays in. And we're like, well, yeah, actually, Detroit City's played in it a few times. And like, but now that they're far enough to get to play against Major League Soccer teams, it sort of like gets on people's radar. So which is great.
Yeah, I kind of consider that the whole lead into the Columbus Crew Open Cup game, that's kind of when DCFC went really mainstream here locally. They were on all the local TV shows, and radio was talking about them pretty frequently, and to be fair, the attention has that brought it up to like kind of brought the basement of the attention level up a notch, while it's not mainstream on all those outlets all the time. That definitely brought it into that level of zeitgeist here locally with playing the MLS sides and having them in town.
Yeah, and that happened with the formerly known as Michigan Bucks. When they were playing all those Major League Soccer teams. I mean, that was big time news. Like when the Metro Stars would come to town, or the Columbus Crew would come to. It might have. I mean, really, was kind of a better story because they were an amateur team playing against these Major League Soccer teams. So getting that far enough as an amateur team, and then obviously they've beaten two Major League Soccer teams, so that is even better. But yeah, I think that's the underdog story is what makes the tournament. I mean, if we didn't have that, I mean, I've had so many people like, I feel like there's been some, and this is in a severe minority, I really think, but like there are people who are like, why do we even bother with the amateur teams? They never win the whole thing. They don't have a chance. And like, I don't know, like they make the tournament what it is. So if they weren't in it, then it would be just kind of a silly Leagues Cup thing. Like I feel like the underdog story, people having a chance, and we've seen amateur teams beat Major League Soccer teams in really dramatic ways. And while it doesn't happen every year, but the same thing in March Madness, like a 16 seed doesn't get knocked off every year, but a 15 seed does sometimes. And obviously we've seen 16 seeds finally go down, or 1 seeds finally go down in the opening round. So the chance of that happening is what makes it special.
Yes, indeed. Well said there. It is funny that this year's edition, for it being like you said, the underdog or Cinderella type tournament, over the years that the number one star is the headline takeaway from this year's edition. That's kind of a funny point. So moving forward, like the format has changed a little bit, the way the calendar works and all that. Is there anything with the qualifying for the next edition coming around? Is there anything you want to see or you'd be excited about with the upcoming edition of the US Open Cup?
We don't know what the format will be for the tournament proper, but like with the qualifying tournament, I mean, I think that they started this in 2015, where before it was the most convoluted, confusing. I mean, we covered it and we tried our best to explain it to people, but it was so confusing. Like it, so there are 4 regions in the amateur level at the USASA level, and they all had their own regional tournament. And then there were also state tournaments. So some of them would have state tournaments, and then that would lead into the regional tournament. And then sometimes they would skip the state tournament, or sometimes they would let the runner up in. I mean, there was no like consistent format. And then Region 4 and Region 3 usually didn't have enough entries to really have a full blown tournament, so they would just have a long weekend tournament. And which was terrible. I don't know why you'd want to play 3 games in a weekend, or sometimes 4 games in a weekend, which is I think is illegal by by FIFA standards. But they so every region had their own tournament, and it was just so confusing for people to follow. And so finally, I think in 2015 they were just like, you know what? Let's just let whoever wants to sign up, and then we will divide them up regionally, and we'll just have a tournament like out of all the regions. So we don't have like Region 4 entering like 6 teams out of the entire Western United States. Then more teams signed up, and now we have tons of teams that are signing up, and it's simple. Like you win and you keep going, and then eventually we're gonna get to a win and you're in round, and then if you win, you're in, and that's it. And it's just that simple. So I think it's so much better than it was. It's still, like I mentioned, like there are still like some teams that are going to have these long travel, games where even one that seems regional, but then if you actually look at the map, like I know Inter San Francisco picked up a win this past weekend, and they are going up north to play a Seattle-based team, which has the tournament's best team name, I think it's Sharktopus FC. Yeah, Sharktopus FC is which is run by, apparently, I'm just learning about this, that their owners were on a reality TV show, and this is where I have to use my get off my lawn thing, because I have no idea about any reality television. Someone had to explain to me the show Love is Blind, I think is the show on Netflix. Anyway, the people who are involved with that show apparently own this team. Anyway, they're going up San Francisco to Seattle, and you're thinking, oh, it's regional, but that's like an 800-mile trip. So like they're gonna have to figure something out, and they want them to play in the morning, and I'm like, how's that gonna work? So I don't know. So there's lots of situations like that come up every year. They're still working on changing that schedule, because that's just not, I mean, that's not cool. Like have them come all the way up to Seattle and then have to play at 10 a.m. But
take on a Sharktopus at 10 a.m. I mean, come on.
I will give them credit. Like, say what you will about reality TV and all that stuff, and apparently they have a really good team too. But they have like the coolest logo. It's. I mean, I guess if you're gonna call yourself Sharktopus, I mean, you gotta come strong with the logo. I mean, it's all right there. So check that one out. It's a pretty good one. I give them a lot of credit. But yeah, that's what we're in round. We just finished. We're about to finish round 2. Round 3 will be, I think, in a couple weeks, at the end of October, and then we do a 4th. We're expecting the 4th round to be like the win and you're in round. So that's kind of where we're at. But unfortunately, we don't have a single Michigan team that entered this year. So I don't know what's happening here in the Great Lakes State, but no one signed up. So there it is.
Any theories on it? Is it the local area here in Michigan have such a rigorous amount of amateur leagues that people aren't looking to add another?
I would love to know the answer to that. Maybe you could interview somebody from the Michigan Soccer Association and figure that out. I mean, Michigan actually hasn't had a strong participation level over the years, even back when it was like that really confusing regional level. There would only be like 1, maybe 2. It would be usually like the Ann Arbor team, that not what was it, Ann Arbor FC, not AFC Ann Arbor, but Ann Arbor FC, and there would be like a Detroit team, and that's it. And that would be like your state championship. Whoever signed up played in a state championship. I think I went to Skyline High School in I don't know, probably 2000. I can't even remember the years. It's all blurry after 20 years. But I remember going to Ann Arbor before I lived in Ann Arbor. I lived in Lansing. I drove to Ann Arbor to Skyline High School and saw these two amateur teams play each other, and that was our state championship. So, and
That the
that's how it was.
Lumberjacks?
I think it was pre Lumberjacks. So and yeah, pre Lumberjacks and Lumberjills. So yeah, I can't remember which teams it was. I think it was just one of the Detroit teams and the Ann Arbor team, and that was it. So yeah, we gotta step. I don't know what it is. I amateur cup. There are some amateur cup teams, but I think I have heard from more than a few teams that like it is a tough sell to certain amateur teams to go into the Open Cup because just like I said, I mean, your chances of winning are almost next to nothing. But I think enough teams think, well, really, I mean, it's not about winning the tournament, but making one of those runs that people remember. Christos FC in the team from Maryland played against DC United and lost 4-1. But if you ask anybody who follows this tournament, they remember Christos FC because they scored that one goal first and took the lead, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, it's happening!" And then very quickly, it did not happen, and then it turned around and DC United won. But for some, I mean, just for that moment where everyone like believed for a moment, and then then it was dashed away. But we've had Cal FC, and obviously I mentioned the Bucks, and there have been other teams that have given these teams a run, and just for that run, for that moment of hope is enough. But for some teams, that moment of hope isn't enough, and so they'd rather play in the Amateur Cup. And oddly enough, if you win the Amateur Cup, you get into the Open Cup. So go figure.
We'll just have to get that winner on board and get us a Michigan amateur participant. But for now, Josh Hakala, thank you so much for coming back on the program. Let them know where all the coverage that I'm interrupting you for. Let them know where they can get that.
All of our socials are U.S. Open Cup, and it's a little confusing because and just so you know, I was first, so I got first pick, so that's why I have U.S. Open Cup. So the federation is actually at Open Cup, so there's always a lot of confusion with that. But at U.S. Open Cup, we've got a Patreon account that we're trying to raise money so we can pay some of these people to go out and cover these games. That is my main goal in this. Like, I'm not obviously doing this to get rich, but if I was, I'd be terrible at it because we're 20 years in. But it's trying to help these all these reporters who are all over the country who help me cover this tournament. It's great, and the fact that they do it on a volunteer basis is amazing. So support our Patreon, and then find us on social media and thecup.us.
Josh Hakala, thank you so much for joining me again on the Michigan Soccer Central podcast.
Hey, happy to be here.